and welcome to episode 86 of our SAP on Azure video podcast. Today is March 31st, and together with Robert and Goran, we're here to talk about anything related to SAP and Microsoft. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
So in the past, we have already talked about the SAP deployment automation framework on Azure. We showed the concepts to some extent. We showed you how to leverage it from Azure DevOps. And today we have Jennifer and Pankaj joining us to talk about, an end-to-end, or to show us actually an end-to-end demo that Jennifer has recorded. But as always, before we hand over to them, let's quickly take a look at some of the news from this week. And I actually want to start with something that is now already a week old, but last time when we recorded the session, this report was not yet published. And I think it is a very, very important or very interesting report from the DSAG, the German-speaking SAP user group. So obviously there's also a German version available, but luckily there's also an English one available. And in this report, they talk about the results of a survey that they did with the DSAG audience. So they ask about the budget situation, what ERP solutions are being used by the customers. So we can see the majority of customers are still using an ERP system, but there is definitely an increase with S/4HANA, S/4HANA on-premise, S/4HANA private cloud edition, also S/4HANA public cloud edition. So there's especially in the S/4HANA world, there's some movement there. And then what is also interesting is they look at the usage of RISE or the familiarity of RISE, like how familiar are customers with the term RISE with SAP. And there's definitely way to go. I mean, a lot of customers have heard about this, but a lot of customers are also not 100% sure what it is. And actually, if you look at then the statistics on are customers going to go to RISE, most of the customers are actually not so convinced yet. So the customers are neutral or probably not, and some of them say that they are likely. So 4% say somewhat likely to go to RISE with SAP. Some of them have already, but there's definitely a lot of room of improvements, I would say, for SAP to push in this direction and to really talk about the benefits of customers running their SAP system with RISE on SAP. There then some other information on success factors, the usage of success factors and other solutions. But I think, if you have not read this report, it's definitely worth checking out. Now, speaking of RISE, we actually that was another thing. So speaking of RISE, we do actually get a few customers that are really actively asking us, well, what about RISE with SAP? How does this work with Azure? How can I benefit from from leveraging Azure as the foundation for my RISE with SAP environment? And actually, our Fast Track team, they are offering a session where we talk about how customers can use RISE with SAP when you still have Azure, for example, in place. Maybe you have an Azure subscription already, where other workload is running. Maybe you are running some dedicated SAP workload also on your own Azure subscription. And in this Fast Track live session, Azure live session, the colleagues Al and Vinod will talk about how you can actually connect your Azure subscription, your private Azure subscription, with the RISE with SAP with RISE Azure environment. So what peering options are available? How can you connect the scenario? Or another thing that we very often hear, how can you actually connect your SAP system running with RISE to Microsoft 365 to send emails? So there are a lot of things that the Fast Track colleagues will cover there. And I think if you are interested in RISE, if you want to benefit from the scenarios that Azure provides, this is definitely a very interesting webinar to join. The next thing, Goran, you just shared about Gluster FS.
Yeah, so there's written a sentence below in overview page, be aware that Red Hat is phasing out Red Hat Gluster Storage. So what's a Gluster FS? It's it's a Red Hat file share high availability infrastructure option, which we in the beginning, when we didn't have an Azure NetApp or Azure File, it was used a lot. Typically, you would place there SAP MNT, central services, ERS files, subtrans, and those kind of stuff. Now, the Red Hat itself is kind of coming to end of the support by the end of 2023. So we are saying we are also still supporting. Of course, it's a good reminder for the customer to move to something else. Always is a good idea to go to the cloud services like Azure File Share, Zone Redundant, or maybe Azure NetApp, which is in regional available. So maybe just a good tip. And another one, of course, high availability again. SQL Server, if you would scroll a bit, I believe, down in the note section, the second part, exactly. So in SQL Server 2090 CU8, there's a possibility to use something which is called direct network name. This means that typically in high availability setup, you would use internal load balancer for the virtual IP. So with this feature, you don't need an internal load balancer either in an HA or HA and DR perspective. So meaning it's much more simple and failover is much more, it's faster because there are no those pro ports. So I mean, when those customers on SQL Server, they have 2019 or would love to go it, I mean, definitely it would simplify the whole infrastructure setup, improve the overall availability. Yeah.
Well,
so
great,
nice stuff.
So now we come to another nice stuff. Robert,
finally something nice. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. So let's hear it from you, Robert.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, what Martin, Pankraz, and I have planned. And finally, we finalized the several sessions, several episodes. So the idea behind the hitchhiker guide to Microsoft Teams and SAP integration is to actually rely on our already provided blogs, what we already have on SAP community or what we have on Microsoft documentation, and go through those steps, and show actually how to do it. And we actually, the idea behind is that we are not preparing ourselves at all. We are just going through blogs and we prepare some materials just to share with audience, but we are really not testing anything. So during the videos, you will see that we making mistakes, that we are hitting the brake and then continuing. I think we just try to have a fun together with all of you. Today we published, I think, 3 videos. Because unfortunately we discovered that I do the wrong video cutting. So I will work on that, and till tomorrow we'll provide all of them. So on the end, we will have, I think, 6 or 5 videos, which will actually show you how to do integration or trust between Azure Active Directory and Business Technology Platform, Azure Active Directory and standalone systems. We will play with Azure API management, and then use this Azure API management to create the bot, and then we will create the adaptive cards on the end. So we will really guide you through all those processes. So, and rely on already existing blocks, what we already provided, as I mentioned, on SAP community side or Microsoft documentation. I think it's a fun way to show you how to do something and give you some internal hints how to maybe configure something much faster or how to avoid some mistakes and so on. I think it's a nice way of doing that. Huh?
No, absolutely. And I like especially that you really take an existing blog post and walk through it. And like any other customers, you do make mistakes sometimes. And then it's good to see the troubleshooting. And I think one last thing to make this fun, don't forget your towel. As a true hitchhiker's guide to the galaxy, you need to bring your towel. So that was also a really nice touch that you showed there.
What I must say, I mean, all credits go to Martin, because I was just a guy who asking stupid questions. We somehow have some role that I'm a guy who have no clue what Martin is doing. So asking a little bit stupid questions, and sometimes really stupid questions because I don't know everything. Oh my God. But I think we just have a fun, and I think I hope they will that you will like it. Yeah.
Yeah, perfect.
I mean, Robert, the Holger will be proud on you.
I know. I just did that for him, because. Yeah.
Thank you, Robert. No, they're really great videos. So obviously, I already watched some of them, not all of them yet, but I really like the way how you walk through them, how you ask questions, how you interact. Because I, as a customer, potentially have the very same questions, and then it's always good to really also hear the details of the setup.
Good.
Cool. Thank you.
Yep, welcome.
The next thing is we talked about the Microsoft Datacenter Tour a few times. So the next one is on April 5th. Now there's a slightly different presenter role. So Johannes Woltermann is now presenting, or I think he actually already presented last time. But Johannes and Dara, they're continuing. I mean, on top of the data center colleagues, obviously, and they're again focusing on what does this mean for an SAP workload? How can SAP workload run on Azure? Why would you do this? So if you have not attended one of these virtual data center tours, it's definitely worth to check it out. So the next thing is something pretty cool from my point of view. We are recording this end of March, but actually tomorrow, April 1st, SAP will have its 50th anniversary. And I already found one link here on the SAP page that talks about this. And there's a really cool video, like 13 minutes or so, that looks back at the history of SAP. You see some really nice pictures and small videos from the past. If you want to see how the 80s looked like or something like that, there's some nice things. And it's, I mean, SAP, it's really fantastic to see the story of SAP here, how they started, how they released R2, then the story to R3, and now S4HANA. It's a really nice video, and I'm really happy. I mean, Goran, Robert, we all worked at SAP obviously as well, so I think it's really great to see how SAP is evolving there, and I'm happy to celebrate 50 years of SAP with them.
Yeah, I mean, half of century for IT. But that doesn't reflect on our ages. I think it's you're still young. Yeah.
Yes,
of course.
Yes.
Okay, good. Then one last thing that I found: Microsoft Build. There's a date for Microsoft Build, May 24th till May 26th. My understanding is it is again a virtual event. Apparently there are local events. Not sure if I guess this is also not on site. I don't know yet, but I'm definitely looking forward to Build. I know there will be some cool announcements, so I think it's definitely worth to sign up. Registration is not yet open. Apparently this will open in April. I think I saw that somewhere. But mark your calendars here. Late in April, you will be able to register. So mark your calendars and make sure to join Build again. Good. With this, that's all the news from this week. And with this, let's hand it over to Jennifer and Pankaj. Maybe both of you can quickly introduce yourself, what you're doing at Microsoft, and then I'm really looking forward to the end-to-end demo of the automation deployment.
Sure. So my name is Jennifer Hajduk. I am a global CSA at Microsoft. I work with customer architecture and engineering, and I work a lot with the SAP program. I sort of hit the button on SAP, and I been sucked in ever since. And I am happy to be able to bring some of these videos to you, which is the culmination of work of an entire team of engineers. So happy to be working with them and happy to be here.
Great, thank you.
Welcome.
Great. Hi, everyone. Pankaj Meshram. I am part of Worldwide Customer Success Unit, where I'm responsible for leading the SAP on Azure technical strategy. I also work with our automation V team, where we have developed this product and also looking looking at the program enterprise kit for SAP from program management perspective.
Awesome. So a couple things before we jump into the demo, if that's okay. first of all, it's kind of mind-blowing, 50 years of SAP, and considering how integral it is in so many organizations. But also kind of to talk about a little bit about, an organization may look at this automation, look at this orchestration, decide, is this for me? And it's important to understand that, automation comes after a lot of design decisions. So after we take a look at our cloud adoption framework principles, and then looking at SAP from an enterprise scale perspective as well, this is really the culmination of all that hard work and all of those design decisions going into one. But the repository does have a sample workspaces folder for you to play with, and for you to kind of get more familiar with. Our repository is, of course, open source, and you are able as an organization to customize it to your needs. And so I guess it's okay if we could jump into the video at this point. Sure. So the first part of the video is super important. We want to make sure that people go to our docs page and read our documentation. You can see the breadcrumbs there, but just to iterate through it, under Azure Virtual Machines, Workloads SAP, you'll find our published documentation where you can find the automation framework. You can learn more about how we set up our automation. So just quickly to go over, it's really it's more than two parts, but there's two main parts that we're deploying. We're deploying a control plane, which is going to have our deployer resources. It's going to have our library resources, which hold our terraform state files. And it's also going to hold our bill of materials, our SAP image that we want. In this case, we're working in the demo, we're working with SAP HANA, but understand there's also other back ends that you can look at to deploy with our automation. And so with the control plane resource, we're really focusing in on our deployer VM after we get the control plane deployed, because from the deployer VM, we're going to deploy the rest of our infrastructure. We're going to deploy what we like to call the workload zone, which holds our virtual machines as well as our networking resources. And just to take a step back right there, a lot of organizations already have their networking in place. They already have a lot of their infrastructure in place. And so what we didn't want to do was say, here's our automation in a box and you can't integrate it with anything and you got to deploy everything from here. And what's great about the automation is that you can integrate those parts. You can integrate your NSGs, for example. Instead of using a deployer VM from our automation repository, you may have your own golden images. You may have VMs that you've hardened. And so we have helper scripts in the repository to, for example, turn a Linux VM into a deployer machine, to update the SAS token for your storage account. So we have these piecemeal scripts, these helper scripts to help you kind of do some of the actions that you may have to do to integrate into your organization already. And so the video sort of starts off, we want to make sure we clone our repo. We want to make sure we have a copy of it. And then from there, really, we decided to make this video easy to understand. So we're just going on the Cloud Shell. There are also PowerShell commandlets in the repository. And of course, we're working on some future stuff we'll talk about in a little bit. But we're cloning our repository essentially to our Cloud Shell session.
Jennifer, are you sharing already something? Because the sharing is not there.
Oh my.
But I think, we could still follow so far. I think that's very, and actually one thing that I wanted to add or highlight what I really like about this whole setup, that as you said, it's not a black box or something like that. So right. I am really flexible on what I can do. And the other thing that you mentioned, this is all open source. So in the worst case, what I can do, I can really go into the GitHub repository and I can do my changes. If I could clone it, I could make some modifications so that it's really very fit to my needs if I cannot even do this without modification. But I can personally have full control of what's actually happening.
Yes, absolutely. And that's really one of the key points of the automation is that we know that most customers, the majority of customers are going to have those things set up.
Yes.
So we want to make sure it integrates nicely into their organization. Also, as I mentioned the repository a couple of times, just for anyone who may have visited the older repository, Azure SAP HANA, make sure you go to the new repository, Azure SAP Automation, and that's going to have really everything you need. We moved it over because it's not only about HANA. You know, some organizations are not quite ready to upgrade to that yet. And I will go ahead and share my screen for a bit there, if I can.
Yeah, perfect. It's coming up. Yes.
All right.
Well,
Awesome.
just share your screen, Jennifer. Just quick points I want to mention around this product.
Yes.
In one of the previous videos, we talked about enterprise scale for SAP and how it provides the best practices, recommendations, and all that thing is embedded into this product, right? So this is effectively the tool which you have, which you can take to your customers, partners, have that discussion on all the critical design areas, and then come and then design their automation based on your discussion. What does the target architecture looks like, right? So this gives you that sort of flexibility where you can go define whether you need accelerated VMs, PPGs, all this sort of best practice recommendations, and then think about final deployment based on your repository. You can clone the repo, you can manage the repo, you can conduct various sort of operations, changes on the repo, and gives you great amount of flexibility from that perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. And we wanted to make sure that choice was up to the customer so that they can decide what they need, because they know better than we do what they need and don't need. So it's really great what the engineering team has allowed the customer to do. Really take it and make it your own. So I believe I do cat out one of the Terraform files in the video, but just to kind of show you, just kind of right here, how you can kind of integrate your subnets. You can integrate your firewall subnets, integrate different types of subnets. You can also specify your deployer VM information. I love that the Terraform parameter files are well commented and well documented, because it could easily get lost if we didn't do that. So they're well commented and well documented, and you can specify many different options as well, including deploying firewall using private endpoints as well.
I have to admit, looking at the Terraform file, when you're not very familiar with it, yes, it's great that there are a lot of comments and a lot of documentations in there, but I still find since I'm not using it on a daily basis, it is sometimes a little complicated.
It can be, and they really want to make it as simple as possible. You know, enter your name here, true, false here. Really just keep it basic, because you know there's a learning curve to some of this technologies that we do use. So the automation does use Terraform in conjunction with Ansible, and I like to call Ansible the magic behind the scenes, but really that's the orchestration piece. That's the orchestration that's going to allow you to install and configure your application. And so that's a lot of what people are interested in. Maybe they already have the infrastructure. They already have their infrastructure as code as well. They have their processes, but the Ansible piece where they can go in and kind of automate and customize, you know, what they need, you know, everything from kernel parameters and other configuration points as well. They can go in there and look at what they need and customize it for them. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, I get sometimes you may get some pushback on Terraform, and maybe they don't have the expertise, or Ansible, maybe they don't have the expertise. We're working on automating that even further to make it just even more, you know, point and click, so that you just customize and then you deploys. So we're always working on making that, more resilient. The engineering team is always working on making that experience better. And of course, it's open source, and we do have a DL in the repository to reach out to. So if you do have suggestions, please don't hesitate to email the engineering team. They would love to hear from different organizations and how it could be better. Just want to switch back to the video here. It's been playing in the background while I've been talking, but essentially I've made it in the video as simple as possible. We're deploying those different Terraform files, and we are on the deployer VM doing that. And so I show you how to go through that in the video. And then as different resources are deploying, we are getting the output that we can make sure and verify that we're deploying the right thing. Everything, from our host and disk data, everything down to the names we're using. And if you can see in the corner, if this bar disappears, you can see our SID as well. So we're getting a lot of verbose information as we're deploying, so that we can verify that if we're deploying from different tools, we might be able to capture that information as well. And so kind of in the end, we've deployed, our 4 resource groups. On the left-hand side there, we have our deployer, our DEP00 infrastructure, and that's going to be where our deployer and our storage accounts are held. On our library, where those are where our libraries, where storage accounts are held, and then our deployers, where our deployer VM, as well as if you want to deploy Azure Firewall or something like that, you want to deploy DNS Zone, that's where that would live. Our infrastructure would be comprised of our networking resources and any NSGs, UDRs, or anything we specify. And then, of course, our system, which is our virtual machines, which is going to, of course, hold our application. And when we go into the system resource group where our VMs are held, we're going to find, if we specified anything like PPGs, proximity placement groups, and if we specified anything that's where we would find that any infrastructure that's related to our VM deployment. Load balancers and things like that. And it's a 30-minute video, so I won't go bit by bit. But what's interesting is our configuration files allow us to configure, our disk. As we can see, we're looking at a parameter file here, Terraform parameter file. We're specifying our load balancer IP and things like that. And again, we try to make this as simple, as straightforward as possible. Just fill in the variable, and the orchestration will take care of the rest. And so we go through and we start deploying our Ansible playbooks, which is actually the orchestration behind the scenes, which installs the application. And so we can see up top here we have different options. So we numbered them. We found the best order in order to deploy these features, and then we put them, in our Ansible playbooks. And so the menu is pretty easy, to read from our base OS config, down to configuring those parameters which are necessary for the virtual machines hosting SAP. Our HANA DB installs when we install the database, our central services and DB load. And I think there's a little icon here. But if we have, our primary application servers and things like that, we try to make it as inclusive as possible, even down to really our pacemaker setup as well. We can configure pacemaker and things like that if that's part of our architecture for SAP. And so this is kind of stepping away a little bit from the Terraform piece and really looking at that Ansible piece, and seeing how powerful it is and what it can do. we kind of go through those steps in the video, and you can see how easy it is. You really you're typing in your options, and then you of course get your verbose output so that you can troubleshoot if need be. You can see if something did go wrong. You can see where that happened. And also specify, the role where that happened, the playbook where that happened, so you can kind of pinpoint that. And so we really we go through this process where we have deployed our infrastructure, and we're deploying our application with Ansible, and it's really, really easy. Like myself, knowing very little about SAP several months ago, and then coming to this level where I'm deploying an entire SAP architecture is pretty amazing. Like I am, as a former engineer for several years, I'm pretty amazed at what they've been able to accomplish and how easy it's been able to be. And I've learned so much about SAP just from using the automation without any other materials. So, my hat's off to, our V team and our engineering team for making this super, super easy and simple to understand.
But actually, I think you bring up a super, super important point that a lot of people that have been using SAP for a longer time really can value right now. I mean, if you're new to SAP and you come in now to Azure and you see, okay, I can deploy an SAP system in a few clicks and then everything is great. But if you have done this like 5 years ago or 10 years ago, I still remember when I installed my first SAP system, that was a long process. So there was a lot of evaluations, a lot of reading documentations, a lot of troubleshooting, making sure that the right parameter files are there, that the kernel parameters on my SAP system or my hardware are set correctly on the SUSE or Red Hat Linux version and so on. So there was a lot of effort involved to finally get the SAP system running. And now, and I think that's really the beauty of your video, and also maybe looking back at the video that Robert and Martin are doing, you're really doing this from scratch. So in the video, you're taking basically the audience, the customer, on the journey to start from a blank sheet of paper, and you're even using the Azure Cloud Shell. So I don't need to install something on my PC, and then you guide them through having nothing to having an SAP system installed. And I think that's really beautiful. You can really follow along and install your own SAP system.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. A year back, I had to start from nothing because, I may not have understood everything that I understand now. And so I kind of want to segue into the second video, which will be forthcoming. We're building this automation in Azure DevOps. And so that's going to be amazing once we get that video out for people so that they can see and understand, again, starting from scratch, how you can deploy the entire SAP system and install it as well. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's going to be great. I wish I'd had it ready for this session, but
okay.
It will be forthcoming as soon as possible.
I mean, we will definitely reference, obviously, this video so that everyone watching the podcast now, that they can easily jump to the first video. And once the second video is available, we'll just update everything. And then the listeners and the audience can also just click on the second link.
Yeah,
but just maybe another thing that I want to highlight, and you briefly touched on this, the deployment that we're doing is not only a standalone system, but I think Goran will be very happy. Obviously, we are really we can deploy high availability systems where all the pacemaker configuration is done, and you really have a system that can be used in production. So it's not a demo test environment. It's really something that is usable in a production environment.
Yeah, we absolutely want you to play with the samples first to get more familiar. But as you can see, it's going to be, this video is only 30 minutes long. It's not a whole, this whole complex thing that'd be if you were doing these pieces manually. So Yeah, definitely play, a little bit with our samples workspaces, but then also you'll be creating your own workspaces folder where your files and configurations are customized to your organization. And then that's what you'll really be deploying into your environment. And then the DevOps piece, of course, I love that we're integrating, we're eat our own dog food. I love that we're integrating, we talk a lot in enterprise scale, and as well as cloud adoption framework, automate. And now we want to make sure that we follow our own path that we're telling customers to do. And so I met a lot of customers that are super excited about using Azure DevOps, and the fact that we can bring this to them is going to be huge. It's going to be very huge. SAP is the corner of so many organizations. The cornerstone of so many organizations' software. So we're going to be able to bring that to them in a even more automated fashion.
I mean, honestly, I'm looking forward to your video, because even if I'm kind of SAP specialist, I still have that hurdle of Ansible to jump over, and so I start and stop. It's just about the preparation part. So I'm really looking forward to I think this is what is missing, because typically if you would have some kind of user interface, it would be much easier. When you have a little bit some kind of command line, okay, the first step, it's you need to put some effort. When you do a demo, that's really great. That's really a great help for the community to go step by step. Yeah, so thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the first video is going to be sort of a prerequisite to the second video. And I may touch a little bit more on the Ansible piece, which I kind of didn't do in this video. I wanted to, make it more seamless. And we have heard that from customers, we don't have Ansible experience. Well, that's not the biggest hurdle that you think it is. And so maybe I'll touch a little bit on the Ansible piece as far as the orchestration is concerned. So maybe that's something we'll touch on a little bit more in the second video.
Great. I haven't went through the whole video, but do you have a part about how to download those bill of materials, the DVDs, as a kind of? All right, great.
We
Excellent.
do. So that's going to be, we download straight from SAP into your storage account, and there is a playbook for that, an Ansible playbook that we use for that. It does take a couple of hours. We're downloading bits of the internet, so it does take a couple of hours to complete, but that we do accomplish that through an Ansible playbook.
Just to highlight, obviously, the customer needs to provide their own S-user. So we are not Microsoft. We are downloading the software. I mean, we are facilitating the download, basically, but the customer needs to provide their own S-user ID.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. We can't give you that. You got to have your own. Any organization that uses SAP is going to have that account. And so, yeah. Exactly what you said. You're going to need to be able to provide the credentials for that account in order to download the software.
One quick thing about the downloading of software, because you raised a very good point, Goran. In every SAP customer, they will have different SAP components. They can have S/4HANA, they can have Keyword, they can have some other products. The good thing about BOM processing is you can prepare your own BOM. So that if you look at the documentation, it gives you the steps, instructions step by step, in terms of how you can prepare a BOM, mention the BOM name, and just use the BOM download processor to download that specific BOM. So that additional flexibility is there where customers can learn quickly, prepare their BOM, and then download using the Ansible piece.
Yeah, and that's really great stuff to have prepared BOM, because if you have to look by yourself, which DVDs, CDs, kernel export, this, that, I mean, it's a lot. It's really, I'm 20 years in SAP and still having challenges with that regards. So it is a great big help. I mean, even that just a BOM material and download it to have ready, what you everything need. It's a huge thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and as we are learning more and more from customers, we are trying to expand that repository of BOMs, so the customers don't have to go and prepare themselves. They can all look at our repository. They can always find if the BOM version, BOMs product is available, and if not, then can go and do something about it. But it's over the time we're going to have almost most of the products available there.
Just for a quick explanation, so this BOM that we're talking about, there is, for example, a BOM for an S/4HANA, a fully activated SP, whatever, and that is available on GitHub. If you take this BOM, then the deployment framework can read all the information of what are the files that are required to fulfill this S/4HANA system, and that's how we can deploy it. So it's a huge, I agree with Goran. I think this is a huge this alone is already a huge value add for customers.
Understanding the structure in SAP marketplace and naming convention is state of the art always. Yeah.
It's interesting because we do have documentation, which, you know, our naming convention that we chose for our automation, it obviously conforms to Azure standards, you know, to the best practices that we see. But we also allow you to change that, right? Because customers, you know, we do talk to them about having a naming convention of their own. And so if they want to change that, there's documentation for that as well, so that you can refer to.
Great.
Cool. Great. No, I think, Jennifer, I think that was a really, really fantastic overview of the video that you have created. And I'm sure this will help a lot of customers. And I think all of us, we are looking forward to seeing your second video, just to put a little pressure on you for the with the DevOps enablement, because I agree with Goran, if we have then a user interface that simplifies the whole steps even further. So I can't wait to see this.
Yes, absolutely. I can't wait to get it out to you guys.
Cool, perfect. Well then, thank you so much for joining us, Jennifer, Pankaj. It was a pleasure having you, and yeah, I'm looking forward to the second video.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.